today, which is really actually kind of nice. You get to visit a little more, and we have some wonderful speakers that are here today, so I hope you can learn a lot. They are going to be returning also for our open house, which is coming up in June, so I'll plug that in a minute. So I have a few announcements, and then we're going to let our speakers get started. On your table is the green half sheet. This is what's coming up in June. Normally not a busy month for us, but is. We have the end of the school year picnic on June 2nd at the Red Barn Park. Thank you, Dan, for that. June 9th, we have our annual open house here from 11 to 1, and we have about 20 organizations, local and from away, coming. So it is a great event to come and learn about different services and different things that happen here and off the island and people who we work with. I'm going to skip over, the blood pressure dates are on here. The new thing coming up is we are collaborating with Nicolay Bank on a presentation about how to spot frauds and scams. This is also on your table. This is a free presentation. It's at 1:30. It's here at the Fellowship Hall. We'll have some light refreshments, and it's open to everybody. And we encourage you to come because there's a lot of frauds and scam things that are on the rise. And the criminals are getting more and more creative. So, also what's popular is public health. Everybody always wants to know when they're coming. Thursday, June 1st, they will be here in the Rutledge room. You do need to make an appointment. We have these here if you want to grab one. You can also register online. They will also have the new COVID booster for the 65 years and plus if you want to get that. So, but you just need to make an appointment. And last but not least, the 911 cards. These are cards we encourage you to fill out and put on the side of your fridge. And God willing, you never have to have the rescue squad come in your house, but if you do, this is some basic information they can get really quickly to assess and be able to help you better. So we have those, and they're over here on the sign-in table. Please help yourself. And I think that's about what I've got. So, yeah, that's your cue. So today we have two speakers from two different agencies. We have Milly Gonzales. She's the Executive Director of Health of Door County. And I'll let you explain a little bit more about what you do. And then you have Asa, what's Asa's last? Patterson, okay. He's a new, oh there you go. He's a new worker and Milly brought him up to see the presentation and meet us. And then I have Sophie, and I'm going to probably butcher your last name. Sielen. And Sophie's with Family Service Agencies and the Sexual Assault Center. So these ladies deal with people who are going through abuse and traumatic situations, and they do a phenomenal job. So here you go. It's all yours.
Thank you. I always love coming to the island because I'm always fed very well, and everybody is super friendly, so just thank you for that warm welcome. My name is Milly Gonzales. My pronouns are she, hers, and I am the Executive Director of Health of Door County. Maybe I'll do this. So a little bit about who we are and what we do. We are the only domestic violence agency in the whole county. Our mission is to eliminate domestic violence through intervention, prevention, services, and also to advocate for social change. What does that mean? That means we teach about domestic violence, and we try and combat domestic violence from a very holistic approach. So we do a lot of preventative efforts with a lot of our youth and families just in general. We do crisis intervention when people don't feel safe in their homes. And we offer safe homes and just like any kind of crisis intervention work. We do advocacy, like legal advocacy or housing advocacy, medical advocacy, criminal justice advocacy. So advocacy is a big word that covers a lot of different things. And then intervention, we work with those that harm too. Because typically, especially when it comes down to domestic violence, a lot of this is learned behavior. And sometimes we have these generational holds in our families where we don't know that what we're doing is violent or causing harm. So we're trying to be cycle breakers of those cycles and educate on what is healthy, what is not healthy, and then what in turn could be abusive. So when we talk about advocating for social change, one of the things we talk about is, a lot of times people ask me, hey Milly, why are you talking about racism? Or Milly, why are you talking about ageism or ableism and all of these different isms that we have in culture and society. And the reason why I love that we have for social change is because what happens in the home is a direct reflection of what happens in culture and society, right? So whatever's happening in the home gets reflected in culture and society, and then whatever is in culture and society is reflected in the home. So at the very core of domestic violence is power and control, and that's where we're seeing that imbalance of power and control, where people in the home may be hurting their partners or their children, or causing harm to each other. And then we can see those aspects happen out in community, right? Maybe you might experience ageism, so because you're older, people aren't taking you seriously or not speaking to you like you know what you're doing or different things like that. Just kind of discredit things. That's an imbalance of power control. So I just want to bring a little bit of education to why we have that advocacy for social change. And then this is our vision statement. We desire a world free of violence that recognizes the uniqueness and capabilities of all persons, where all people have access to resources, where all people respect each other and appreciate those differences. And I think that's what I love about our relationship with YCHIP. I think that's kind of the same vision that Christine has and that YCHIP has, is we want to connect people to resources and we want everybody to be treated equally, and we have that desire, right, to appreciate the differences that we have, but also honoring what we have in common. Okay, you're going to be my clicker. Okay, so what is domestic violence? And a lot of times when I think, or when we speak on domestic violence, people get automatically, they think about physical violence, where someone is hitting someone, and we think about like kicking, biting, punching, all of those things. But there's other aspects to domestic violence, and I want to go into this definition. It's a systemic pattern of behaviors in a relationship that are used to gain and maintain power and control over another. All right, that's a mouthful, right? But it even gets a little bit more complicated here. So violence doesn't only have to be physical or sexual. It could be verbal, emotional. It could be displayed through isolation. I'll go a little bit more in depth with that a little later. Oh, there it is. No, it's okay. But also, domestic violence can also be teen dating violence. So even if you're not living in the same home and you're underage, but if there are power and control differentials, that is underneath domestic violence. I also want to highlight a little bit about elder abuse. Elder abuse is also domestic violence. So you don't have to be in an intimate partner relationship with someone to be considered domestic violence or related to that person. So let's say that you are an older person and you have a caregiver in your home that comes to visit you in your home, and maybe you don't have, maybe you might have some mobility issues. If that caretaker is using power and control, right, and causing harm, and you're afraid of that caretaker, that too would be considered domestic violence under elder abuse, right? So the main takeaway I want you to have is, are there power and control differentials, and are you scared, okay? Doesn't have to be physical, doesn't have to be sexual, like I said. Are there power and control issues, and are you scared? So power and control plus fear equals domestic violence. A lot of times people get that confused because they confuse it with unhealthiness, but the main component is having that coercive control plus fear will make something violent. Thank you, Asa. All right, so here's this power and control wheel that I have been speaking about, and I think we have a really good idea of what physical violence is, right? Like I mentioned, the punching, kicking, hitting, pulling hair. Sexual violence. I want to talk about a little bit about sexual violence, but just a little because Sophie's going to be here. But the same thing, like some things that we don't think about under sexual violence would be doing something against your will or being pressured to do something sexually that you're really not interested in. Having your partner give you STIs or forced pregnancies. That's a lot of what we see in the domestic violence realm. And then I'm going to start with intimidation. So these are different ways that domestic violence shows up. So intimidation would be, am I posturing? When I'm saying something, is my partner or my children or something coming up to me aggressively so that I don't speak? Is someone throwing things at me? You know, like things where I'm not being physically abusive, but I'm trying to control the situation. And I want you to think of any time, if you've ever had a time where you want to have a conversation, but even you're afraid to have that conversation, so you're gonna avoid saying certain things because you don't wanna walk on eggshells. A lot of that is because of the intimidation that has happened before. Using emotional abuse would be a lot coinciding with verbal abuse. Being called outside of your name, so being called names, being yelled at. I want you to think about people making you feel like you're going crazy. Gaslighting. Does anybody know what the term gaslighting means? It's basically being convinced that what is happening isn't really happening. So I can give you a quick little example with one of my clients that I'm currently working on. They would set, or I think someone was talking about that, they would set their keys next to their nightstand, and then their abusive partner would move those set of keys. Was that you, Raisa? No, but it was recent, right? Yeah. So their partner would grab those keys while the other partner would sleep, and then they would hide the keys on them. They'd be like, you're going crazy. This is why I'm telling you, you have to go and get medicated, or this is why you need me. You have dementia, you must have like early onset Alzheimer's. And in reality, they're being gaslit. That really isn't the issue that's going on, but they're being made to think that that's going on. I've had situations like that even where a partner was unplugging the spark plug from the vehicle, and they'd be like, you are so stupid, you don't even know how to start your car. And that person really was going to start the car and was like, writing down, like, I press the gas, I do this, it's not starting. And they didn't know they were being gaslit until they saw that person re-put in the spark plug, right? People can be so nefarious. But can you understand how, like, let's say an individual does have mental health issues, or is taking some medication that might say it might cause some dizziness or confusion, how this can exacerbate certain situations, right? So that would be considered underneath emotional abuse, making you think like you're going crazy, playing mind games, making you feel guilty, humiliating you. Maybe telling stories in a friend dinner that you didn't want exposed, but like just humiliation and embarrassment and little sneaky ways that you can do this. Using isolation, so controlling what you read, what you do, where you go, who you're allowed to hang out with. Don't be friends with Milly, because ever since you've been friends with Milly, you're talking about this is unhealthy, right? So just different things that get used among them. So a lot of times it's not going to be, you're not allowed to leave the island, or you're not allowed to go here or hang out with them. But I want you to think of, like, is there a situation where, do we really have to have your kids over? Do we really have to go to your parents' house? It's so boring, they don't like me, I can't stand that. Or does your partner pick arguments before a big family event or after the event? Start ignoring? Isolation can show up in different sneaky ways as well. All right, minimizing, denying, and blaming. So the example that I give here is, okay, I'm gonna do it, but I'm not gonna use the verbiage that I usually do. Let's say that Asa, I'm gonna make you the bad guy, Asa said, Milly, you're a horrible boss, and you're just a witch, right? That's what Asa did. Asa, you're fired. Just kidding. But in reality, I'd say, Asa, you know when you called me a horrible boss and that I was a witch? That really hurt my feelings. And Asa minimizes. So Asa says, Milly,
I know I was joking.
no, I don't really know you were joking.
Just kidding.
But he can say, I didn't really call you a witch. I said you were acting like a witch. Right? Have we ever heard that? Maybe with another consonant instead of a witch with a B? Right? Okay. So denying would be, Asa, please deny that you called me a witch.
I would never call you a witch.
But Asa, you did call me a witch and it really hurt my feelings.
You're out of your mind. I would never call you.
Guess what? Now I'm back in emotional abuse, right? What if I'm getting blamed, right? So I said, hey Asa, when you called me a witch, that really hurt my feelings. Asa's new, let's give him some forgiveness. So blaming would be, you know what? I wouldn't have called you a witch had you, let's not do the work thing. Now Asa's my partner. I wouldn't have called you a witch if I didn't have to work all day and come home to a messy house. Of course I'm going to be in a horrible mood. You're a witch, you didn't control the kids, look at all the mess around this house, you didn't have my dinner done. I work all day long for what? For you to stay at home? It's your fault that I called you a witch. You know what? It's also the kids' fault that I'm calling you a witch. It's your fault. And in reality, we know that nobody makes us angry, mad, glad, or sad, like things, situations do, but we're still in control of those emotions, right? So understanding that we're still in control of how we behave, and no one typically is in control of your own emotions. All right, so using children shows up by making you feel guilty about your parenting, and using children to further abuse, using visitation and exchange, or using custody, using the legal system, saying that if you divorce me, guess what? You've been a stay-at-home mom, you don't have your own job, I'm gonna take custody away from you. Can you see how someone might stay in that relationship to keep that family together and to make sure that, hey, I have somewhere to live, right? So it gets really, really nefarious, guys. Also, so I don't want to only talk about male privilege. I'm going to go into a little bit of male privilege, but when we talk about power constructs, there is imbalance. I know there's men in here. There is imbalance between men and women. Women are still paid substantially less than men, and there's just different power dynamics that happen within society and culture. But when we talk about privilege, and I'm going to hone in on here, it's like treating your partner like a servant, making all of the main big decisions in the home, being the one to define who and what the roles are of men and women, and also know that I'm speaking of binary. I understand that abuse can happen also from female to male, or to non-gender conforming folks, or trans folks, and all of these things. But to be honest with you, the vast majority of violence perpetrated is on other men, women, and children. So I want to talk about that's why the power control is using male privilege. But can we see if there were a woman in a position of power and control, and she were abusing her partner, and she said, go ahead and call the police, do you think the police are going to believe you? Because all I have to do is start crying and then tell them that you're doing this to harm me. Can we see how we can utilize privilege in one way or another? Now let's think about privilege that maybe I'm the executive director of Hubbledore County. I work with victims of abuse. Could it be that if my children or my partner were to say, hey, Milly is being very unhealthy and very abusive, where they would dismiss that because of my position and because I'm trusted in the community? Now let's think of other positions where that can happen with law enforcement, church officials, right? Government officials, trusted people in the community. So I'm not saying that because I'm harming my family, I'm not. And if they were ever, like I always say, believe survivors, even if it were an accusation against me. But let's take that out of that mind, right? And then using financial abuse, I'm gonna give you a really crazy statistic. Over 99.9% of all victims of domestic violence are also being abused financially. That means I don't have access to income, or that could be me that my partner is sabotaging my work. That could be that I'm hiding income. That could be that I'm forcing you to work, but I'm taking away your money. Financial abuse can come in many different ways and forms. So just understanding that that's a way that people stay trapped in those domestic violent relationships. And then also using coercion and threats. So making out threats to something, I'm gonna hurt you, I'm gonna leave you, I'm gonna commit suicide, you can't leave me. And then our children are not gonna have both parents and all of these kinds of things. I'm gonna call your probation officer, your parole officer. You know what? Those boudoir pictures you gave me on our 25th wedding anniversary, guess who I'm gonna show those to? I'm gonna show them to a pastor, to your work. Now can we see how in different age ranges that might happen, especially with youth in school? Or people, like, where you're like, what? You're gonna say what? And why people would be like, no, I don't want that getting out. And why maybe you wouldn't report that. So that's just a little glimpse. I can always come back and give you a little bit more in depth, but I don't wanna stay here because we're sharing our time. But now I wanna talk to you about what a healthy relationship looks like. So instead of the threats and that coercion, let's talk about non-threatening behavior. What I'm gonna say or what I'm gonna read up on here is gonna be like, yeah, that's common sense. That's how we should be treating each other. But I want you to think of, remember when I talked about micro and macro and how what happens in the home is reflected in society? Please look at this in both lenses. Is this what happens in home? And then think about what's been happening in our culture and society in the last couple of years, because I think civility is not happening right now, right? Just generally and cultural. So are we talking and acting so that people feel safe and comfortable expressing themselves and doing different things? Because if you are, awesome. Thank you for being a great example, and let's keep that going. But I'm seeing a lot of disconnect with that. Instead of verbal and emotional abuse, can we respect each other and listen to each other non-judgmentally and being emotionally affirming to those that we're in contact with and also our partners and our children? Are we valuing each other's opinions? We don't have to necessarily agree, but are we valuing that everybody can have their own individual opinion? Trust and support. Are we supporting each other's goals in lives? Are we respecting your own feelings and friends and activities? You know, and that's the opposite of isolation. So are we respecting that you have a relationship with your children or your friends, your own hobbies, your clubs? Maybe you want to garden and your partner is being very supportive of that. When I said Asa, you called me a witch and that really hurt my feelings. What would be the correct way to do that, right? Honesty and accountability. Show me one.
I'm sorry I called you a witch. I didn't realize that I was hurting your feelings.
Thank you so much, Jason. I'm glad that we could clear the air and we could, now you won't get fired and we could actually be good. So it's right, accepting responsibility for myself, for each other, acknowledging past use of violence, because what if Asa called me a witch multiple times, right? And I've said this, and we've had this conversation multiple times. The biggest thing that I say is, when you address certain things and it keeps occurring over and over, it's no longer an apology, it's manipulation. So let's keep that in mind, right? Non-manipulation would be, I'm sorry, and then change behavior. So it's okay to admit when we're wrong. Somewhere along the line, it was like, hey parents, you don't have to admit you're wrong when you're parenting, or as elders, right? Like, you don't always have to do it. It's like, it's okay, don't worry about it. But when we start setting that example, even as young with our grandchildren or with our children, we're teaching people to admit that they're wrong later on, and it's not a character flaw. We're not walking around perfect, floating on water, right? Like, we're regular people when we make mistakes, and it's okay to admit that, and that's healthy. And actually, that vulnerability makes strength. Responsible parenting. So instead of creating dissonance between families or maybe triangulating within families, are we supporting each other in our parenting? Are we on that same page? Are we using positive nonviolence when we're parenting, right? So instead of hitting, actually having conversation and talking about the effects and consequences of certain behaviors. Shared responsibility. So instead of defining men's and women's roles, so originally I was a stay-at-home mom and I did all the traditional stuff that a stay-at-home mom would do, and that was an amazing part of my life. But right now, as an executive director of Huckleberry County, I probably average about 60, 65 hours a week. So I no longer do the laundry and I no longer cook. That's my partner that does that. But it wasn't assumed that my partner's gonna do that. There has to be a conversation. And I know early on in our marriage, we just assumed the roles that our parents have always done. And things are growing and it shouldn't be that way. We can have that conversation. I actually love to mow lawn because it lets me relax. So that's kind of something that I do instead. So it's like, hey, I don't have the capacity to do dinner every night, but can I mow the lawn for you? And then you do dinner every night. So it's just having those conversations and that partnership along with economic partnership. Even as a stay-at-home mom, I had a healthy economic partnership. So I didn't have to ask for permission to spend money. I had an idea of what our budget was. But we see things all the time where even like people are not allowed to buy period products because that's not household expenses. You need to figure out how to do that, right? Where they're given $500 a month and they're a family of 6, and then you're supposed to figure out all of the food and all of the paper product expenses, and then you're getting yelled at because you're having spaghetti every night and certain things like this, right? So it's just like, are we having healthy conversation? Am I aware of what's happening financially in the home? And we're both benefiting from that financial situation, regardless of if I'm working or not, because we're having those healthy conversations. And then negotiation and fairness. So are we seeking mutually satisfying resolutions to conflict, accepting change, and being willing to compromise? Because guess what? Again, we're not perfect. I know we'd love to be perfect, but we're not. And we are going to have arguments within our family, within our partners, with our elders when we're caretaking. The thing is, can we have a conversation to rectify that, right? and come to seek having that mutual understanding with regards to that. All right, so, woo, that was a lot of information really fast. I talk really fast, huh? Okay, so I want to give you a little, I should have put this a little to the earlier and I blinked, but I've already introduced myself. I want to give you a little insight on who my team is. So I have a programs manager, her name is Tracy Robertson, and an operations manager who is Sue Farley. So basically my program manager oversees all of my direct services, and my operations manager is my right-hand person who helps me do all of the administrative work that Humboldt County does. And then I have a visitation and exchange program. So visitation and exchange is a program where if a restraining order is in place or there are parents that can't exchange safely with a child, we provide that, and we provide that at no cost. So basically we provide a safe place where children can be picked up and dropped off to maintain that safety and that connection to both parents. We also do supervised visits. So if a court orders supervised parents because they deem one partner not safe over the other, we go ahead and facilitate that as well. Our DBIP program, our coordinator for that program is Clara Fleming. And basically what she does is work with those that harm. So we do, it's a 30-week program, and basically we're getting to the root of why you hold the belief systems. The number one question I always get asked is, why don't they leave? If you're being abused, why have they left? My thing is, why can't the number one question be, why do people think it's okay to treat people this way? Why do people think it's okay to abuse? And that's very victim blaming language, and I know that's a big like social work word, like don't victim blame. But in reality, that's what we're doing, right? Someone is getting oppressed, someone is getting harmed, someone is being abused, and then we ask them, why are you allowing this to happen? Instead of saying, why are you doing this? This is not healthy. This is not safe. So that is what Clara does, is to say what you're doing is not healthy, and let's teach to where you learn these belief systems, and let's transform that way of thinking. And then our advocates. So you've met Asa, but we do have Ava Badeau and Kaylee Dotter. And basically, all of our advocates are cross-trained to work with elders, to work with youth, to work with crisis, to do all of those different types of advocacy we talked a little bit about. Okay, so one thing that I really want you all to know, that HELP has a 24-hour hotline. It doesn't matter that if you're on the island, it doesn't matter if you're on the peninsula, but just know that that 24-hour hotline from the hours from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. is going to be picked up by someone here at the office. And then I have hotline advocates that are available from 4:30 in the afternoon till 8 o'clock in the morning. So it doesn't matter what time. We will figure something out in order for you to be safe. So if you're feeling unsafe in your home and you don't want to call law enforcement because maybe law enforcement is related to the person that's harming you, right? There's many reasons why people don't reach out for help, but that's a number where we will plug you into safety, planning, and also a safe home. And yes, all services are confidential. And actually, there's a state statute that doesn't even allow me to confirm or deny. So sometimes I have law enforcement that says, Milly, I dropped off this client yesterday, how they're doing, and then I have to tell the police officer, I can't confirm or deny that Asa is my client, right? Even if they saw that, it is completely confidential. And even when we're subpoenaed, we will fight that subpoena in order to not access records because it's involving someone's safety. And the number one reason why people don't leave is because that's the majority of the time when homicides occur. So a lot of times you'll see like murder, suicide. Folks, that's domestic violence, right? Sometimes what we read or what we see in the media is changing different things. But in reality, intimate partner violence or domestic violence was at the root of that. And we're seeing a big correlation between that and also mass shootings. So just kind of keep that in mind. And that's the reason why we keep everything safe and confidential. And in order for me to reach out to other resources or on your behalf, I need to get a release of information for every little bit. And you have to give me the permission to speak on exact information. That's how tight-lipped we are. All right, so what's the role of an advocate? I'm going to pass this off to you, Asa.
All right, so as an advocate, we do direct client services. So we're working So when a crisis happens, we directly work with the clients that call in. We do crisis counseling, DV education, which you saw with the power and control wheels, safe homes, safety planning. Safety planning is one of the biggest parts in making sure that the clients are safe after, if they're trying to leave the situation, or it's a process. We're trying to figure out next steps. So youth programs, we do a lot of work with our youth. We actually have working with summer reading program at the libraries, doing program with youth to build healthy relationships and understanding friendship. It's titled Understanding Friendships Through Creative Expression. That's with youth programs. I'll go more into that on one of the next slides. And we also have a list of referrals that, excuse me, we have a list of referrals that we give to our clients. It's a long list of a lot of different
Programs, community programs.
yes, yep.
All right, so I'm just gonna expand.
Expand a little bit on here. So safety planning for me, I know that a lot of these words are like, but give me an example of what that looks like. That looks like working with a family that maybe they don't know what they're experiencing is domestic violence and they're a little confused. So they set up an appointment and then they're like, this is what's happening. And we ask a series of questions and we do the education and it's like, oh my gosh, I think this is what's been happening. I think this is violent. I thought that maybe that person, that time that they slapped me across the face was just gonna be once and it's starting to escalate because violence typically escalates throughout time. So it's having those conversations of what's healthy, what's not, what's safe, and then seeing what it is that our client wants. A misconception is that domestic violence agencies want to tear apart families. I don't. And we never tell people to stay in their relationship, to leave their relationship, to do any of that. Basically what we do is safety plan. So we tell you, these things have been occurring, and statistically, and this is what typically will escalate to. And if you stay in your relationship, these are some of the risks. If you leave the relationship, these are some of the risks. This is what the positive outcomes are if you could stay or if you can't. And you make that decision. I'm there to support you in whatever decision you want. And sometimes those are very difficult conversations to have. I've had a conversation with a client where initially when they started coming in and they said, Milly, I'm not ready to leave. That's not what I want. I just want to be educated so that I have the proper tools to educate my children. And I said, fine. Is there ever a point that you might want to leave? Yeah, if he ever hits me, I'll leave. And then sure enough, months later they came back and they were hit. And they said, you know what, I'm not ready to leave. And I said, okay, then what is the line next, right? Because you have these options, and this is what can happen if you stay. What's your line so I can remind you? Well, if they ever hit me in the face, okay. So we'll keep working together, and we're saving money for maybe an exit strategy. We start talking about maybe looking for housing or being put on certain lists for resources. But the same client came back. And now the next time that they came back, they had a big bruise on their side of their face. And I said, remember when you told me that was when you would be hit, and now it was when you were going to be hit by your face? What's the line for you? I said, I don't know. Strangulation, Milly. I could take the hit to the face. Strangulation. Because we go over different types of abuse. So again, this person came in, and now it's on a strangulation charge. And we know, right, there's 750% chance of a homicide happening after one strangulation. She comes in, strangulation has occurred. She wasn't the one that called me. It was actually a lethality assessment call, so law enforcement called and connected her exactly to services, and she ended up being in it was a strangulation. And I said, are you ready to leave or not? What can I do to support you in either way? Because we said strangulation, right? Do I have to teach you how to get out of that hold? Can I teach you different things, how to protect yourself? In different ways we're gonna do that? And I'm like, is that the line? And she's like, I still can't go. And I understand, because she's afraid, and there's so many different things that are happening in that home, right? And then I had to remind her that there is no next line. Once we hit strangulation, homicide, and lethality, a homicide is likely to occur. And with every strangulation, it gets worse and worse. And that's the difficult conversation we have to have. But it's not in judgment. It isn't like, hey, this is what's happening, right? But just understanding that sometimes the systems that we turn to for help may not be helpful, like the legal system or family court systems and all of these different things. And I've actually had people come back into that abusive home after they've established themselves outside because they have shared parenting, and now they're starting to see bruises on their children, and the CPS calls are not turning into investigations, and the other partner is not losing visitation with their children. So I've actually had a mom go back into a situation because when I was with them, they never hit my children, they only hit me. And I know that my family and everybody think that I'm being a really bad mom, but I've tried it legally. I've tried it through the court systems, I've tried it with CPS, and I'm not being fully supported, and now I have to protect my children. So I don't care what community members or my parents or my friends think, I need to be there to protect my children. Can we relate to that? Can we understand why someone might stay, even in those different situations? And let's think about resources. Do we have like public transportation and all of these housing opportunities and daycare opportunities? No, we struggle with that in York County, and I'm sure you struggle even more so here on the island with these things, right? So I want you all to keep that in mind. All right, so I'm gonna go a little bit deeper into those programs I talked to you about. Again, visitation exchange provides safe, secure environment for parents while exchanging or visiting with their children. Again, these services are free of charge. And it provides healthy interaction for family members and prevents that victimization to happen between two people, those two partners in that situation. Also keeping the children safe within that so that they're not name calling or being in between that. Also, domestic violence intervention, nonviolence program for those who harm. And we're taking a transformative justice approach to bring awareness and patterns surrounding abusive, controlling behavior. It isn't like, shame on you. It's, why are you thinking this way, right? What is leading you to think that this is appropriate? And what happened to you in your childhood? And let's like talk about and kind of unpack some of these things. Obviously, it's an accountability program where we're transforming these mindsets, and we always refer to them like, hey, I'm not your therapist. I'm here to show you where these lines are accountable, and I'm centering my survivors in here. But you might want to go see a therapist, or you might want to go do something else aside from this. All right, youth programs is really huge for us because if we can teach our youth how to be healthy friends, can we teach them to be healthy partners? If we start doing this, because I think sometimes some of us are raised in loving, happy, healthy homes, but a lot of us are not. And we don't teach a lot of emotional intelligence in schools, so it's super important to do that. So not only is FIRE, so FIRE is age for high school students between the ages of 14 and 18, and then Sparks and Flame are, the youngest we've ever had was like 7, right? Yeah, 7 to 13. So once you get in high school age, you go to FIRE, but it's Sparks and Flame. So FIRE stands for Forging Youth Relationship Education, and actually the group Sparks was started by my daughter, and I'm going to brag a little bit about her, I'm a proud mom. We were at a conference at actually Teen Summit, which we're going to be headed to this weekend, and then there was a national speaker there called Dr. Bettina Love, and she said, what did you learn of being part of this conference? And she said, she was like, ooh, everybody else was quiet. Can you imagine that she's my daughter? Of course she is, because I'd be like, ooh. And basically she said, I learned that the high schoolers here, and a lot of the youth here, are ignored by adults. They're not taken seriously because they're young. They're discredited, oh, you're not that smart, or you don't know better, you haven't had that life experience, and they're kind of like denied, right? And then she turned around to all of the high schoolers that were with her, because we brought about 25 kids to this conference. She said, you want to know what else I learned? That you do the same to us because we're younger. You're no better. And she said, one day I'm going to start my own group, and it's going to be called Sparks, because you can't have a fire without a spark. And that hit. And actually, we were so proud to be able to unroll that program about 2 years ago. And our youth program, so even the Sparks and Flame program, is actually more successful right now than our fire program. All right, so how do you get involved? There's different ways you can help support Help's mission and the families that we serve. You can volunteer. We always need people to answer that hotline. You can volunteer for just a side project. So I know that there's a Lions member here. Just kidding. But maybe like sometimes we have gardening projects. Sometimes you might tomato plants, and you come through shopping, and you're like, hey, I need to get rid of these. Those would be great for our families, because guess what? I can go ahead and plant them in our raised bed. Just little things. Maybe you're great with IT. Maybe you're a great storyteller. Maybe you're a grandma and you love to read to kids. Maybe we can set something up here so Asa can come here, and then we could connect them with healthy people where we can be learning and teaching all of the knowledge that we carry within us, right? And then obviously, the vast majority of the funding we get, I do get state funding, approximately about $156,000 a year, but it really takes me about $500,000 is my budget. The rest of the funding, aside from very small community grants, are donations from people like you. So that is another way to get involved and to help. And then I think the pun was intended. Who else thinks that Asa's joke was intended? Help spread the word. So it is talking about healthy relationships. And it's thinking about the next time you respond and you're like, ooh, I was minimizing and denying and blaming my behavior, right? Having some self-reflection is number one, and then also being willing to call out people or call them in to that behavior and say, hey, I haven't seen Milly at church for the last 3 weeks. That's strange. What's going on? Can I check in on my neighbor? Can I check in on people? Make sure they're being connected. If I see that somebody is struggling, being able to connect those pieces and then refer us if you know that something is happening, or maybe you're starting to see mysterious bruises or illnesses, injuries. Check in on people and connect them with us. All right. And then Asa put an amazing book recommendation, because that's something that we have as a resource library at Help of Door County for our staff, our community members and things. And use your library too. I love the library. I love all of the audiobooks and everything. I'm a big shop component. And they do have this, so it didn't start with you. So if you want to learn a little bit more about generational trauma and basically how our DNA is actually rewired when we experience trauma, that's a really good resource. All right. So we're going to actually hold our questions at the very end, and I'm going to pass this off to Sophie, but I just want to thank you again for participating in the lunch and allowing us to be a part of this program.
Hi everyone, my name is Sophie. So I work for Family Services Sexual Assault Center. I'm the Door County Coordinator and Victim Advocate. I'm just going to do a really brief kind of explanation of my program and role and kind of the services that we provide. So I'll kind of run through that. So this slide right here just does a really brief run through of our services and our program. So the Sexual Assault Center is a program through Family Services, and we provide services in Brown County, Door County, Marinette, and Oconto counties. We provide services in 4 counties. Our center has been providing services in Door County since 1995, and our address is right up there. Our address and where I am mainly working out of is an office in Sturgeon Bay, but I provide services to all of Door County. Our services are where we assist survivors of sexual assault, sexual harassment, any types of sexual violence. We provide a variety of services that are really individualized to each person and family that we're working with. So our services are provided to not just the survivor, but we can also provide services to loved ones, family members, friends, supports to that individual. Our services are free and confidential, and kind of how Milly explained, we're not gonna be sharing information with people unless they kind of talk with us and give us that permission to do so. So even if we're working with not just the victim but family members as well, we're still keeping that confidentiality, and we're able to provide support to the support people in someone's life, but also that individual without breaking that confidentiality. But it's really individualized to each person that we're working with. Our program is a 24/7 program, so I work kind of normal business hours, but since our program is 24/7, we do have that 24/7 hotline and availability to response for the crisis interventions. So our hotline is that number right there. So the next slide is going to go into services, but I'll just briefly explain a little bit. And then we have the hotline and in-person response. So each person that we work with has an assigned advocate, and for all Door County cases, I'd be the advocate working with them. So they have my direct contact information. I'm able to talk with them, meet with them in person, provide that support. But if there's something that, say they're experiencing a trigger from their trauma and their assault, and it's at 2 a.m. and they need to talk with someone, while I'm their advocate and they have my direct contact information, I might not be responding right at 2 a.m. But our hotline, they can call, and that hotline is staffed by the other advocates that I work with and that provide support in the other counties that we work with. So that hotline is available for them to be able to call when they're having that trigger and that nightmare at 2 a.m. that they need to talk to someone in that moment, or on the weekend when I might not be responding right away. But that hotline is a response and someone is able to talk with them. And then I can, if on the weekend, I can follow up on Monday and see how they're doing. Or if it's 2 a.m., I can follow up the next day and see how they're doing. But there's still that response so that they have someone to be able to talk to at any point. So like I said, our services, this is kind of super brief run through of our services, and I'll just stick on this side to kind of explain them. Our services are really individualized for each person. We have that hotline, an in-person response, and then so we have the crisis intervention response. So that's really how, like, right away when we're getting connected to clients. So there's a variety of ways we can get connected to the clients, and it can be if they are making a report, if they are going through the legal process, or if they just are wanting that support. So we're not going to, while we provide legal advocacy and support throughout reporting and the legal process, if they aren't wanting to report, they're just wanting that support, we can provide that support to them, and we're there with them throughout that process. So we're kind of meeting them where they're at, and if they, whatever direction they want to go, we're there to provide that support to them through that process. So with that 24/7 hotline, if someone's making a report, we're getting informed by law enforcement, or and we can respond out right away to law enforcement and be there to provide support to that victim while they're making that report. We also have, if someone's responding to the hospital to get an exam done because they are wanting to get evidence collected or make sure that their body is okay after an assault, we're able to respond to the hospital and provide that support and get connected right away with them and be that support. That emotional support side is there through the follow-up, and it's kind of just where each individual person is at. Some people want to be in touch kind of weekly. Some people just want that support when they're making the report and with court hearings, because we're able to provide support if a case does go to court. We're able to provide that support by going with them to court or going to court on their behalf. They don't want to go to all those hearings, but they want to know what's going on. We can be there to help support them through that process. But if someone is just wanting those follow-ups and not wanting to do that legal process, that's completely fine. We explain all those different directions while we're working with them. So there's a variety of ways to get connected with us, and it doesn't have to just be through law enforcement or going the legal route. They can call the hotline and just get connected to us directly. We do have support groups and individualized services that we provide, and information and referrals within the community. So getting connected to additional resources. If there's not something that we're able to provide, we make sure that we are talking with our clients and getting them the support they need. And then I'll just do a little brief run through prevention and outreach. That's another part of my role. So I'm able to do prevention education, which is talking about, Milly did a great job going over lots of different types of prevention. Our prevention kind of overlaps a little bit, but talking about consent and boundaries, healthy relationships. And that's something that we do with every age. We're able to provide prevention education from kindergarten all the way through high school, and going into the classroom, going into the schools, and having those conversations and presentations. We can also, I do that one-on-one with clients sometimes if there's a specific topic that, like boundaries or healthy relationships, something they really need to want to be learning a little bit more about, we can do that. But another point that I like to touch on is prevention education with parents and caregivers, family members. Because it's not just that one 30-minute presentation they have at school every year. It's having these conversations at home and helping parents to be able to know how to have these conversations. So I have resources that I share with parents that I work with that want help having these conversations with their kids at home and making sure their kids are educated, but they don't know how to start those conversations. So I have those conversations not just with the kids, but I do that with the parents. And sometimes I can even meet with them together and kind of model that for the parents, so that they kind of know how to keep those conversations going at home, so that they can make sure their kids are are educated and safe and feel that they can come to them if there's something going on that they need to talk about. Are we short on time? Are we good?
We're getting close.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's like
So-
1:30.
Yeah, so,
Sorry, Sophie,
no,
I'm not
no,
her.
you're totally fine, it's okay. So I'm just gonna do that brief run through on, my services, so I can kinda leave it there, but I do have, brochures and then my card as well that's here, which the card has my direct line on there, and the brochures go through our services a little bit more as well. But feel free, if anyone has questions or someone that they think would, benefit from working with an advocate, definitely feel free to get in touch with me. I'm happy to answer questions or kind of talk some more about my program and services a little bit more. But yeah, I'll just kind of leave it at that for now though. And then if anyone has any questions for either of us, we can have them.
And you're back next month.
Yeah, yep, we'll be here.
So if you don't have questions today and you have them next month, come to the open house. She's gonna be here. You can talk to her there.
Same, and even though I did do a lot of talking, we do have the different programs and the different things we have here as well, and marketing materials. And then also, I brought, our newsletter.
So if you wanna walk out, please grab a newsletter and grab information here. We did bring brochures on visitation and exchange program. But does anybody have questions for myself or Sophie?
I do for you. I'm just wondering what kind of numbers do you see,
Sure.
say, per month? or
Sure,
per
so, last year's number, this year's, it's kind of weird because we do different timing of our numbers, but last year, the entire year, we served 369 unduplicated clients. So that means about more than one person a day with a new person a day that experienced domestic violence. So those are my crisis numbers, and then we also serve children and families under visitation exchange and that DVIP program, that domestic violence intervention program. We also had 6 clients on the island. And because of the increase in numbers, that's why Christine and I connected, and we want to make sure that people know about our services, because we have this misconception that that doesn't happen here. In Door County, and the tourism and everything's beautiful. They're like, this stuff happens in Door County. We were just having this conversation, right?
Yeah.
And it does happen here, and it happens here. It happens everywhere. It doesn't matter what your race is, what your age is, if you're married or not, socioeconomic status, all of that. Domestic violence has no prejudice. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I have a question. If somebody is an abusive person, is there help for them
Yes.
through this program?
Yes, that DVIP program that I was talking about, domestic violence intervention program. The vast majority of the people that end up in that program are court mandated or maybe have caught criminal charges, but we do have people that are like, hey, I'm struggling and I'm realizing through this education that I've caused harm. Can I get help for that person or whatever? And yes, we will accept them into that program. And here's a vulnerable moment. When I first started in this field and I learned the power control wheel and equality wheel, I was probably 4 years into my marriage. And I came home and I was like, ooh, we're both very toxic and unhealthy. And we are passing on these generational curses, right? And it was just kind of like, I didn't know that that was abusive. And I'm saying that as the executive director of this organization. Now, my partner and I have been married for, it's going to be 21 years, but we did our work. And we were able to break that and stop this toxic, unhealthy behavior so people can change.
Yeah, right.
Anything else?
Well, I'm assuming too that there's a crossover.
Yes, and that's why I brought her along, because I'm like, there's so much, because these dynamics of power and control, and like working with prevention and support groups, and the topics that she's talking about, because sometimes we don't have conversations because it's never been taught to us on how to resolve conflict, or how to set, we're the guest people, yes, can you work on Sunday for the church? Yes, I can you make 150 books? Yes, I can. Sometimes like it's simple as that to have boundaries, and when do we start saying no, and that no actually feeds into consent, and it's all of these big words, but it's just, words. Any more?
You have to learn the word no up here really well.
Me too, sister. I'm like, yeah, I can relate.
That's a tough one.
So if you don't have any questions or you have questions that you're not comfortable asking in front of us, again, all of our information is here. You can connect with Christine, you can Google us, Facebook, Instagram, all of that good stuff. And then we'll stick around a little later so we could be respectful of time. And I apologize for being such a fast talker and taking a lot of Sophie's time. I'm so sorry, Sophie.
Thank you, everyone. That was a great presentation. For those of you who are still here, we do have just evaluations on the table. If you take a minute to give us your feedback, we really appreciate it. And we're going to do the drawing for the lunch card. So you're here, so you get to pick a name. Just pick one. Sorry, they're a little Annie. You got a $25 gift card to Jackson Herb Soup. Oh wait, he's driving community van today. See?
I was gonna tell Annie that I always love eating at Jackson Harbor Soup.
We tried together last year at the open house at Jim Park. But you still had a good lunch.
Yes, yes. I'm telling you.
We're good at food up here, I'm telling you.
Great at food.
Yeah. So, awesome. Good job.